Hi, my name is Sharon Sarago, and we are going to continue on with our study of the grammar that you're going to find on both the SAT and the ACT test. We've already done subject-verb agreement, and we've done pronoun usage, and the next thing that we're going to do is parallelism. Parallelism probably isn't new to you. When you do outlines for research papers, I'm certain that your English teachers have taught you how to use parallel structure in that. The fact is that parallelism is extraordinarily important in all areas of writing essays. So if you have a list, for instance, then everything in that list has to have the same structure. So let's just get started and look at some examples, and I think you'll understand real clearly. The first thing that we want to start with, of course, is looking at things in a list. So if you have several things, you want to be sure that they are all the same structure. What that means is, if you have a noun and then you have a second noun, everything in that list has to be nouns. So even if it were just two, they have to be the same. It's not tied just to nouns. It could be adjectives, it could be prepositional phrases, it could be anything. So your first task would be to find the error in parallelism, two things that are not structured the same, and you may have a variety of ways to make that parallel. Let's look at some examples. Here we have the coach tried to get the team to practice. Now this is an infinitive. To study, another infinitive, and so you already know that the third thing has to be an infinitive, to eat well. The next example, researching the material looks like a gerund phrase. Making the presentation, another one, and if we have another one coming, it has to be a gerund phrase also. Tallying the results. Look at this next example here. Maria likes singing, a gerund, dancing, a gerund, and we should be looking for another gerund. But instead we have an entire sentence. She likes to paint. Not only that, it has an infinitive in it. So I have some choices. I could say she likes singing, dancing, and painting, and have all three gerunds. Or, since this one has the infinitive in it, maybe I like that better. I could say, Maria likes to sing, to dance, and to paint. As long as they're all the same, it doesn't matter. Even if I wanted to have all sentences, she likes to paint. Maybe I like that whole thing right there. Then I could say, Maria likes to sing, she likes to dance, and she likes to paint. So you have choices about how you fix it, but you have to be sure that they all have the same structure. Let's look now at these sentences and see how you would fix them. The lead dancer was tall. This is non-negotiable, it's not underlined, and it is an adjective. And since you have an and, you know that you are joining this to something else, and whatever comes, it has to be an adjective. Well, we have a whole verb phrase here. The lead dancer was tall and had a lot of grace. All of this has to be restructured. You simply rewrite it with one word, and it must be an adjective. So the lead dancer was tall and graceful. Next, my cat is sleek, adjective, independent, adjective, and we have to have another adjective. So you have to take this entire phrase right here and turn it into one word, an adjective. And of course that would be affectionate. Kelly decided to go to the store to clean the garage. We have an infinitive here, an infinitive there, and this next one has to be an infinitive phrase. And you know, of course, infinitive phrases begin with to, followed by a verb. So you're going to change this phrase, he went swimming, into an infinitive phrase, later, to go swimming. He decided to go to the store, to clean the garage, and later to go swimming. Number 4, I was amazed to see how he painted, how he sang, and since we started this phrase with how, and we started this one with how, then this next one needs to start with how also. As long as you can repeat words, you're going to be much better off. I was amazed to see how he painted, how he sang, and how he built almost anything. And then, of course, the last one, David repaired the machines. Now we have a verb phrase, greased the engines, and scratched this out and painted the doors. Add an ed to that so that the tense is the same all the way around. It's quite easy. You just have to know that it needs to be done. Now when you get to the test, the parallelism is really hard to see. It never sounds bad because we're not listening for those kinds of things. All we're listening for is sense. We want to know that the sentence makes sense, that we can understand it, we can comprehend what the person is saying. So the fact that it's not parallel is not an issue for us. But when you're taking the SAT and you're writing that essay, it will be an issue with your grader. And when you're taking the SAT writing section, they have questions on parallelism. So you must be able to spot an error in that area. So let's go ahead and look at some more examples. We have comparison and contrast also. Here we've got, I like reading more than I like to swim. Well, the point that I want to make here is that this is not a list. This is a comparison. I like one thing more than I like the other one. But it still has to have the same structure. So this was a gerund. So this whole thing over here has to be a gerund also. The whole thing. One word. I like reading more than I like swimming. And you can see that now you have two things to look at with parallelism. List and comparisons and contrast. But the principle is the same always. If you've got two things, whether it's a list or whether you're comparing something, they have to have the same structure. Let's see how you do on some practice with this. Her discomfort was caused more by a fractured rib than that one of her lungs was punctured. So here, it was caused by a fractured rib, and then you have this strange structure that one of her lungs was punctured. This is a whole clause, and this is a prepositional phrase. So this is going to have to turn into a prepositional phrase in order for it to be correct. How are we going to do that? You recall I told you just a moment ago that if you can repeat words, it makes things easier when you're trying to correct an error in parallelism. So if this were a prepositional phrase, then why not start with the same preposition and say by? Her discomfort was caused more by a fractured rib than by a punctured lung. Just reword the whole thing, then by a punctured lung. Number 2, she was not only industrious, but also, well, this is an adjective. It's one word, adjective. And so the rest of this also must be one word, an adjective. So how can you change this whole, it looks like a sentence, doesn't it? She could be depended on. Badly written, but she was not only industrious, but also dependable. Number 3, pioneers came with hopes of being happy and free, and, well, this is an adjective. The second one was also an adjective, so what do you think you have to have? Another adjective instead of an infinitive phrase. So let's just scratch that out, and then we have our next adjective. So if we have 3 different adjectives here, then we have parallel structure. Pioneers came with hopes of being happy, free, and prosperous. Now, it was originally written with this and in here, That's okay. You can say, pioneers came with hopes of being happy and free and prosperous. There's not anything wrong with that. We just generally don't use this one. We generally put a comma there, but it's not a rule. Number 4, the players were annoyed not so much by the decisions of the officials. Look at this. We've already got our prepositional phrase. And what do you know? You have to have another prepositional phrase. That's what you're comparing, but you don't have that. All you have is an adjective and a noun. So we have to make this a prepositional phrase. And remember, I told you that if you can repeat the words, do so. And so, wouldn't it be okay to do it like this? The players were annoyed not so much by the decision of the officials as by the hostile crowd. Now, number 5 is the hardest one that we have in the entire series. And it's because you have to get the entire sentence in parallel structure. So, to some people, war is a romantic adventure. Here's the next thing. This is the comparison. But a horrible business is the way the wise person regards it. In order to do that, we're going to have to start with the same prepositional phrase, to some people. And how do we do? Oh, here, we can use the wise person. And we can say, but to the wise person, then the next thing was war. And we could say, oh, here's the pronoun for that. So we could say, to some people, war is a romantic adventure, but to the wise person, we could say it. Then comes next the verb. It is, here we go, a horrible business. To some people, war is a romantic adventure, but to the wise person, it is a horrible business. This sentence has to be parallel all the way through. This whole section right here must be parallel to this whole thing. Okay? Okay, so like I told you, when you see this kind of error in your writing section, it's just an essay that they've presented to you, and they're going to have some sentences that are not parallel in structure. They will not sound funny. And that's what's going to make this test hard for you. You have to know to look for it. At this time, we're going to take a look at test-taking practice, and it will include everything that we've studied about. So you will have questions here on subject-verb agreement, pronoun usage, as well as the issue of parallelism. So let's have a look. To become better artists, we must continue to find good teachers, and it is important to enter competitions. Clearly, that is not parallel. We have two things that we have to do: to find good teachers, and remember, that's going to join. That's your key for, you've got to look for parallel structure. So all of this then has to match this. And yes, it would be choice D. Number 2, the boys in the class finished the test first, but looks to me like this whole sentence is going to be your pattern, and then it has to match with this. The boys in the class finished the test first, but the highest scores were made by the girls. Well, your first clue is that it starts off with the boys, and therefore it would probably be the best idea to start your sentence off with the girls, just like this one did. And then you have a verb. The boys finished, and here we have it. The boys in the class finished the test first, but the girls made the highest scores. This one right here has too much additional information in there when you can make it more concise right here, just like this first one. Number 3, Since students are challenged to start thinking about their majors before they actually enroll in college, okay, some students take tests to help identify his strengths in certain areas. All right, so perhaps you aren't really sure what this question is about. Look at your answer choices and see if that helps you. What you want to do is look for words that change from one to the other. So you have helping to help. That's one thing. But look here. You have a singular pronoun there, a plural one there, and a plural one there. So that means we need to check out the pronoun. As a matter of fact, anytime you see a pronoun, you must go back and find the antecedent. So, what is the antecedent for this? Since students are challenged to start thinking about their majors before they actually enroll in school, some students take tests. Here it is. Students. Some students take tests to help identify it. This should be there. Okay? And so now we know that since your antecedent is plural, your pronoun has to be plural in order to agree with it. And we had two of them here, so we have to decide which one. Some students take tests to help identify his strengths, and we've got to help identify their strengths in certain areas. That would be exactly the same words except to fix the pronoun. Or to identify and help. This one won't work because it sounds like you're trying to help their strengths. So we have answer C here. Let's go on and do some more. Although the document was filled with mistakes, the secretary was adamant in her refusal to accept responsibility for it. All right, remember what I just said? Every time that you see a pronoun, you have to go look for the antecedent. So what is this it that they're talking about? It says, although the document was filled with mistakes, the secretary was adamant in her refusal to accept responsibility for the mistakes. And since mistakes is plural, this pronoun has to be plural. So we have a choice here. Although the document was filled with mistakes, the secretary was adamant in her refusal to be responsible for them. Or we've got this comma here that's missing right there. And since this is an introductory element, we have to have the comma. So now we have the comma there. The secretary was adamant in her refusal to accept responsibility for them. D would be our answer. If a student realizes how important issues like absenteeism and tardiness are in the workplace, I'm going to stop because the rule is every time you see a pronoun, you have to go look for the antecedent. And who are we talking about? A student, not a dozen of them, just a student would be your antecedent, and it's singular, therefore this has to be a singular pronoun, which would be he. If a student realizes how important issues like absenteeism and tardiness are in the workplace, he can use that knowledge to his advantage. Number B. To quit the contest early is relinquishing. Well, it looks to me like we have two things right here. This is comparison and contrast, isn't it? To quit the contest early is, it should be to relinquish, because we have an infinitive here, we have to have an infinitive there. So where is it? To quit the contest early is here, to relinquish the title you have already earned. There we go. In each one of these sections that I have on this program, you're going to have the test-taking practice, just like we saw just now, but you're also going to have what I call a passage-based test. And that is an essay, and it will be just like the essays that you find on the SAT and the ACT, and it will have errors underlined, and you have to decide how to best rephrase that part. So let's take a look at this one. I'm giving you only 3 questions on this. The passage-based testing is extensive, just like it is on the SAT. And when you get your materials, you'll find all of the rest of this passage. Have you ever found your imagination running wild, placing you in some strange setting with even stranger characters playing out the fanciful daydreams of your mind? It happens to all of us, but for some, the imaginings of the mind becomes the stuff of wonderful stories. You will always find the issue that they are testing you over underlined, just like this is underlined. Then there's going to be a number by it, and then your task is to find out what's the best way to say this. It could be correct, as you can see, no change, or it could have different forms. So our choices are become, became, had become. When you're talking about your verbs, you want to know what it is that you're talking about. What we've learned is that a subject determines what a verb is going to be. If the subject is singular, the verb has to be singular. If the subject is plural, the verb has to be plural. So what is it that's becoming the stuff of wonderful stories? It's the imaginings. Remember that we do not pay attention to prepositional phrases when we are trying to analyze subject-verb agreement. So while it might sound good to say the mind becomes, it has nothing to do with reality. The subject is imaginings, and that is plural, and therefore your verb must be plural, so you cannot have it ending in S. It has to be imaginings become. That would be choice B. Then as we go on, we say, a good story writer has the uncanny ability to take the everyday affairs of life, fuses them with wild ideas, and then produce fiction. Well, we have a problem here because it looks like it's not parallel structure. So what are we comparing? A writer has the ability to take, that was the first thing, so this would have to be an infinitive also, to fuse them, and then it's still parallelism, to produce fiction. Let's see if our answers agree with that. The uncanny ability to take the everyday affairs of life, to fuse them with wild ideas, and then to produce. Here we go. That's what you have to do with parallelism. And this is what your test is going to look like. All of the other exercises up to this point have been to help you learn how to do this. At the end of all of your work, you will always have the answers to look at. So here they are for this video. You will have 2 pages of them. And when you download your materials and you take all the tests there, then you will have many more exercises to do, which is good. The more practice you have, the better you will understand this. So this is parallelism. You may want to watch this several times so that you get a better understanding of it, and you should always go back and review the other videos also, because the more times you visit it, you will hear new things each time, and you will learn it better that way. If you need to contact me, you've got my email address here, and please visit the website because you may find some interesting information there. I wish you luck in your studies of subject-verb agreement, pronoun usage, and parallelism, and then I look forward to working with you in the future.